We're on the hunt for Russian spies with Norway's domestic intelligence agency, the PST. Regional Chief Johan Roldsnes is operating in a town right on the border with Russia. Both its ties to Moscow and proximity to key NATO bases have made it a focal point for covert operations.
It's very rare to get this kind of access, particularly in such close proximity to Russia.
For this community, everything with a link to Russia is treated with suspicion.
They call this spy town. They're following me. Everything what I do.
When you get the kind of off feeling that somebody is doing this on purpose, this is not natural.
It's just weird. I swear we've seen this car on numerous occasions before. This makes you paranoid. That's the whole thing about this place. You kind of imagine that you see things sometimes. You can't help but think that there's something weird going on.
Kirkenes is located at the eastern tip of Norway.
Beyond this fence here is Russian territory.
The red and green post marks where Russian land begins. The black and yellow symbolizes Norway. Its proximity to Russia has made it a key target in operations to surveil NATO.
Last year, a Russian citizen drove for 14 hours to take photos of some military infrastructure, and he was fined and banned from Norway for 5 years.
Elsewhere in the high north, Russians have embedded themselves deep in Norwegian society. Mikhail Mikushin claimed to be a Brazilian researcher named José Assis Maria. But while focusing on Arctic security at a university in Tromsø, he was actually a deep-cover Russian spy. This video shows the moment of his arrest in 2022.
It seems so kind of old school Soviet, and it takes a huge amount of resources to use an illegal in that way.
Mikushin was exchanged in a prisoner swap in 2024 and was greeted personally by Russian President Vladimir Putin upon his return. In addition to cases of deep cover espionage, hybrid tactics such as sabotage, cyber warfare and arson are ramping up all across Europe. Authorities suspect Russia and its allies are behind these attacks. Norway's high north is particularly vulnerable to threats. Access to the Barents Sea provides strategic military positions in the Arctic and opens up a channel for Russia to reach the Atlantic. The waters are also a prime location for the fishing industry. But Norway says Russia is utilizing its fleet of civilian trawlers to conduct covert maritime intelligence operations.
We have a general assessment about all civilian Russian vessels posing an intelligence threat to Norway. It can be a way to transport in somebody that wants to conduct a sabotage operation. Russian intelligence, what they're best at, that is using all forms of legitimate causes to exploit that in intelligence gathering. This is some of the port facilities. This is a deep water dock for bigger vessels. And we have a Russian vessel over there.
The port is only one of 3 in Norway that Russian vessels are allowed to dock at. And the problem for the PST, the concern, is that many of these vessels might be coming in to do espionage activities, to gather intelligence for the Russian state. And that is why they come here on a regular basis. They inspect the vessels, and they're always studying the identities of the Russian crew that come in to dock at this port.
Although this vessel doesn't appear to be suspicious from the outside, Johan can't rule out that those on board have links to Russia's domestic security agency, the FSB, or its military intelligence agency, the GRU.
And that's the kind of nefarious part of this, right?
Yeah, you can't make Russians outcasts.
No, no. Most of them are sailors, most of them are simply doing their job. They're here to make money and bring it back to their families. The problem is that you never know, right?
No, you never know, and that's part of the uncertainty.
The police help to investigate the identities of those on board.
They are not, like we used to say, the normal Russian seamen who used to be a little bit older. This guy looks to be in very good condition, well trained, and more focused when we are on board, more interesting in what we are doing and the questions we are asking.
The ship came after 2022, when Russia updated its naval doctrine to allow civilian vessels and crews to be used by the armed forces in wartime. Most vessels travel here from Murmansk. the home of Russia's Northern Fleet and where many of its highly strategic nuclear weapons are located. To understand more about how Russian agencies work in Kirkenes, we're going to meet resident Frode. He's a former border guard who was previously convicted of espionage in Russia and is now convinced he's under surveillance.
I know they're following me because it's a Russian officer in FSB has told a man that they are very disappointed of me. I see sometimes Russian men on your age going in the evening, take photo different places in Kirkenes. They are everywhere.
During the 1990s, he befriended his Russian counterparts. They drank vodka together, skied, and even swapped uniforms and weapons.
They had a bad time in Russia in 1990s. We need to help them many times with some equipments. But we get very close, friendly cooperation.
Frode's closest Russian colleague, Anatoly Voznyuk, later turned out to be working for the FSB. At the same time as developing this friendship, Frode agreed to complete jobs for Norway's military intelligence. He dispatched money and memory cards in envelopes across Russia. In 2017, he was arrested by Russian authorities on charges of espionage.
FSB told me they have always, early in 2016, get an order to catch me someplace.
You think that Anatoly was on your side or he was working for the Russians?
Then he working for the Russian, really. He could say something to me in 2016. Frode, don't come back. He could. Frode, don't come to Russia.
Yeah.
They will arrest you. He could do that. But I cannot blame him for that.
Monitoring the border with Russia today, 19-year-old conscripts. They say they rarely interact with their Russian counterparts.
We have to be prepared for everything, so it's pretty special that right over there, a couple hundred meters, is a country that is at an active war in Ukraine. Some people think it's dangerous, and it's just a reality that we have to accept.
They monitor Russian movements, waiting to see suspicious signs from the other side.
And presumably, in those watchtowers over there, the Russians are watching us right now. Both sides, of course, are patrolling the border areas at a time of very, very high tension in this region.
The atmosphere in Kirkenes has undergone a seismic change following the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Hundreds of Russian citizens live here. Many gather at this Soviet memorial, where division over Moscow's war efforts has taken center stage. One resident displayed a flag of Russia's paramilitary group, Wagner. The PST says those attending events here are vulnerable to recruitment.
In general, all ties to Russia impose some risk of being pressured or doing it voluntarily in support of the case.
That's as sanctions on border crossings have made it harder for Russian spies to collect information themselves.
We see some efforts recruiting on social media or crowdsourcing. You can pay a random guy 20 euros to photograph a site. That's happened in Poland and the Baltics. So they have adapted to the situation.
Natalia is a Russian resident in Kirkenes.
Это фугаска со Второй мировой войны. Была скинута в этом районе, мною немножко отреставрирована и используется под клумбу цветов.
She says there's been an increase in posts on Russian Telegram and Facebook channels in Kirkenes, asking residents traveling across the border to drop off parcels or letters.
Вот этой вот наивной бабушкой, которая там кому-то помогла, ой-яй-яй, о-ля-ля, понимаешь или нет, а потом я...
Citizens like her regularly travel between Norway and Russia to visit family or bring back products.
Причем, что вода из России.
But since the full-scale war in Ukraine, she's been careful not to draw attention on such trips.
Были какие-то попытки вас использовать?
Слава Богу, таких попыток не было. И, возможно, это благодаря тому, что мы тоже начеку, и Я не ввязываюсь в какие-то истории, но есть случаи, когда люди просят помочь. Живут на юге Норвегии, у них нет возможности приехать в Россию, перевести какие-то документы или деньги. Я отказываю.
In addition to suspicious activity online, there's also a distinct strangeness to this town out on the streets. While filming, we had reasons to believe we were under surveillance.
It's just weird.
Something so strange about the way that's parked.
Yeah, we've seen this car on numerous occasions before.
We've been photographed while conducting interviews, and one of our sources was tailed by an unknown man after we met with her.
That's the whole thing about this place. You kind of imagine that you see things sometimes, and then everyone tells you that you need to be on guard because you might be watched, and you can't help but think that there's something weird going on.
We've also been trying to speak with Russian officials to get their perspective on the situation in Kirkenes.
We haven't received responses to our calls or emails. So I'm just going to walk up and see if I can knock on the door of the consulate and perhaps we can speak to them. Да, здравствуйте. Я корреспондент газеты Wall Street Journal. Я писал вам имейл и еще звонил, просто хотел узнать, можно ли взять интервью у консула тут.
К сожалению, нет возможности, поэтому пишите на почту, как будет время.
For Johan and his team, combating the actors behind hybrid threats will continue to be a difficult but key focus.
When you're in a border close area, you have to try to frame what you can do something about. I can't do anything about geopolitics, but I try to single out what issues I can handle. And Russia, who knows what Russia's plan is, but I don't see kind of a positive outcome.